Really, Dad? Mom is right. You really are a jerk click. And that's the last I heard of my daughter when I hung up the phone on her. Oh, she tried sending me text messages over the next couple of days, but I just deleted them. There were even a couple of voicemails, but I just deleted them after hearing the first couple words. It was all the same. It was just my ex-wife's words and my daughter's voice. She made her choice 10 years ago, and she could live with the decision. This so-called olive branch was nothing but an insult. So I'm Tom Williams. I used to be married to Kayla Williams. We had been married about 17 years when everything fell apart. Of course, I got blamed for it. That's what happens to the innocent fools in our wonderful divorce courts in this country. Blame the man, then let the ex-wife have full custody so she can tell the kids what a horrible person their father is. As I said, we had been married for 17 years. We had 2 kids, a 14-year-old son and a 16-year-old daughter. I thought everything was going great. I loved my wife, and I was sure that she loved me. Our kids were smart, athletic, well-adjusted, and good-looking. Carly was a daddy's girl, and Josh was a friendly and athletic boy. I was making decent money as a mechanical engineer, and Kayla had a good job working as an accountant. We both worked out to keep in shape and were both fairly good-looking. As I said, Carly was a daddy's girl through and through. She seemed to idolize me, and I was wrapped around her little finger. She seemed to be good at math and science, so she decided that she was going to be an engineer like Daddy. She got her driver's license the day she turned 16. She, like me, loved driving. From when she was 10 years old, she would be out in the garage handing me tools as I worked on the various projects that I took on. I love mechanical things and cars that I can tinker with and build up. She has developed my love for them as well. Some weekends we would go to car shows together and spend the day admiring those beautiful machines. It just seemed that we were practically joined at the hip almost every weekend. I was also pretty handy at home improvement projects. Carly was always excited about helping me whenever I did a project around the house. I taught her basic plumbing, electrical, drywall, and painting. She was right there with me when I installed new appliances. She even helped me with a new concrete slab that I put in beside my workshop. While Carly would go to her mother for girl stuff, which I was very happy about, it was me that she would come to for advice and help with everything else. Homework, drama with her friends, advice on things that she was thinking of doing, boys, etc. We were very open and honest with each other. When she was in trouble, it was my phone she called for help. I had my daddy's girl and Kayla had her mama's boy. Josh never really got into cars and mechanics like his older sister did. He was a good student, but science really didn't excite him much. He excelled more in English, literature, and civics. He started talking about becoming a lawyer. Sure, Josh and I hung out as well, but he seemed to be more attached to his mom than me. Kayla seemed to be a bit off for the last couple of weeks. There was nothing overt, but she just seemed to be a tad distant. And she would kind of zone out for a minute or two lately. I asked her a couple of times if everything was okay. Again, nothing really overt, but just a bit off. It was on a Friday evening. I had just gotten home from work. It was 6, as was my usual time getting home on a Friday evening. I saw that Kayla was already home as usual. I walked in the door and called out that I was home as usual. Unusually, there were no smells of dinner cooking. Also, Carly didn't come down and greet me. Granted, she's a teenager now, but she usually greets me if she's home. She and Josh must still be out with friends. Oh well, I set my briefcase in my office and went upstairs to change into more comfortable clothes for the evening. When I walked into the bedroom, I saw that my wife had laid out her little black dress, stockings, and heels on the bed. That explained the lack of smells for dinner. Obviously, we were going out tonight instead. I wish she would have given me a heads up on it, but I hadn't made any other plans anyway. Kayla was still in the bathroom applying her makeup when I walked in. "Where are we going, sweetheart?" I asked as I started to take off my dress shirt. "We aren't going anywhere," she replied. That was odd. Well, if we aren't going anywhere, why are you getting all dressed up and have a fancy outfit laid out on the bed? I said we aren't going out. I am. Really? And just where do you imagine that you are going, dressed like that, without me? Also, where are the kids? I had a bad feeling about this. The kids are spending the night with friends. I'm not sure exactly where my date will be taking me, but I most likely won't be home until tomorrow morning sometime. What do you mean your date, and you won't be back until the morning? Just what I said. I'm going on a date tonight, and if it goes as planned, I will be spending the night with him, she said calmly. No way. What makes you think for even a second that I will put up with that? Forget it. You want to go out and have fun? You can wait for the divorce to be final. Stop being ridiculous. There will be no divorce. I'm just going to do this once, then everything will be back to normal. I need this night. We've been married for 17 years, and I just need to go out once to prove to myself that I'm still attractive to other guys. If you really love me, you will let me have this night, and it won't even be a big deal. Well, if you really loved me, you wouldn't even consider doing this. I do love you, but I need this. I'm getting older and I need to feel that I am still attractive to other men, particularly younger men. Clarence is about 10 years younger than me. He's been flirting with me over the last 6 months, and I decided to finally take him up on his offer. It's just one night of fun to assure myself that I'm still a desirable woman. This is just a confidence booster for me. I've been noticing a few signs of aging, and I need a boost to my self-esteem. I don't need this, and I'm not going to put up with it. Remember that part of the wedding vows about forsaking all others? You do this, and you are breaking your vows. Don't be silly. This is just a one-night thing. After I get back home, I will never do it again. I promise. Are you naive, or is it that you think I am naive? After breaking the vow you made to me in front of God, family, and friends, do you honestly think that I would ever believe a simple promise from you made in private? Simply put, if you go through with this, we are over. You walk out that door, and I will be meeting with a lawyer as soon as possible. Don't be melodramatic. There will be no divorce. I will come home and be the loving, devoted wife I have always been. If you try to divorce me, I will fight it as long and as hard as I can. You will end up losing the house, most of the assets, and I will get full custody of the kids. Furthermore, I will do everything I can to make visitation difficult for you, and I will put the entire blame for breaking up the family on you. I will make sure that your kids end up disliking you. I was shocked at her words. You claim to love me, yet you would do all that to me? Absolutely. I do love you, but if you try to divorce me, I will fight you on it. I don't want to lose you, so I'm just giving you the consequences of your actions. Look, I told you that I just need this one night to prove that I am still attractive and desirable. Yeah, well, what happens in a few more years? What about the next time that you start to think that you are still getting older and wonder if you can still attract a younger man? Let me guess, he's very good looking yet. And the rumors around the office say that he is charismatic. I'll bet that he's dated almost every woman you work with too. I promise that won't happen. And yes, there has been some gossip that I've overheard. I admit that I am curious, but it will just be a brief fling. If you follow through with this, I already told you the consequences of your actions. If you call him right now and cancel, we can go through marriage counseling and work to save our marriage. Don't be silly. We will be fine. If you really insist on counseling to heal your bruised ego, we can talk about it when I get back tomorrow. With that, she continued to get ready for her date. I changed into a pair of jeans and a t-shirt, then left the room. She was downstairs a little while later, dressed in the clothes she laid out. She had her little purse and was inspecting herself in the mirror by the door. I was sitting in my recliner in the living room. I heard a honk from a car outside. He's here. I've got to go. I'll see you in the morning, she said as she walked over to give me a hug goodbye. I turned my head and leaned away from her. She ended up hugging air. She stood back up and regarded me with a frown. Fine. Be that way. Once you get over your little tantrum, everything will be back to normal. With that, she turned and strode towards the door. I made one last plea. If you walk out that door, we're done. You better carefully consider if this is worth throwing 17 years of marriage away. She turned to look back at me. I'm not throwing anything away. As I said, I'll be back, and everything will go back to normal. With that, she opened the door and walked out. Yes, I began crying for the loss of my marriage and the woman I had loved exclusively for the last 20 years. 17 years of marriage, 1 year of engagement, and 2 years of exclusive dating. I had no idea how she could do this to me. Sure, there were some disagreements, as there are with all couples. Still, we discussed things and came to a mutual agreement on them. I had decided what I was going to do if she went through with this. After half an hour, I finally got up and went to work. I guess I waited that half an hour for her to come to her senses and come back. Obviously, that wasn't happening. I went upstairs and began my plan. It really wasn't much of a plan, but it was the best I could do at the time. It was a fairly large 4-bedroom house. Master bedroom, Carly's room, Josh's room, and a large guest bedroom. The guest bedroom was actually a second master bedroom with a private bathroom. We had used it for when either hers or my family visited. We would also use it for the kids' sleepovers. Now, it would be my temporary bedroom. It took me about 2 hours to completely move out of our old bedroom and into my new bedroom. I was under no illusions about what would happen in our divorce. This was a no-fault state. What that means is that the divorce laws in this state were written in a way that didn't focus on assigning blame to one person. Basically, unless the wife was convicted of some major crime and sent to prison for at least a decade, the husband would bear the consequences. It didn't matter if the husband was a completely innocent victim. The wife would end up with the house, kids, child support, maintenance that used to be called alimony, and the husband would be left with all the bills. She gets the best outcome, and he gets a difficult situation. After getting my new temporary living quarters sorted out, I went down to my home office and accessed our online banking. I had opened up another account just in my name a few years ago. It wasn't for any sneaky purposes, it was just so I could buy her presents and surprise her. We both had access to our finances, and there were a few times when she happened to see a purchase I had made for her. Needless to say, there wasn't much of a surprise for her birthday or Christmas. So, I opened a new account in just my name strictly for purchasing her gifts and keeping them secret. I decided to repurpose that account now. She knew about it, but she didn't have any access to it. First off, I transferred exactly half of our checking and savings into my personal account. Next, using the remaining money in the joint account, I paid off and closed all our credit cards. I then applied for a couple of new cards in my name only. Yes, I should have paid everything off before transferring any money, but I decided it was better to pay back whatever a court ordered me to than to try and collect anything from her. I would transfer my direct deposit from work into my personal account on Monday morning when I got to work. I would also have to call our broker and have our investments split on Monday as well. Having accomplished what I could, I poured myself another glass of a strong drink and headed up to my room for the night. I finished my drink as I got ready for bed. It was not a good night's sleep. First off, I had gotten used to sleeping next to my wife. The bed seemed empty without her there. Then it was that my mind simply wouldn't shut off. I kept going over what I could have done to prevent this. Should I have tried to convince her not to go? Talk to her? Would it have made a difference? It was a long night. I did doze on and off fitfully, but not much. I finally decided to get up as light began coming through the window. I was still tired, so I decided to shower more to help myself fully wake up than anything else. After shaving, showering, and brushing my teeth, I put on casual clothes and went downstairs. I ate breakfast and drank a couple cups of coffee while reading the newspaper. It was 9 in the morning when Kayla happily walked back into the house. I was in my office on the computer looking at apartments to rent. I had already researched lawyers and made an appointment for Monday afternoon through their online scheduling. "Good morning, honey. I'm home, just like I promised," she cheerfully greeted as she entered the house. I just ignored her. Throughout the night and this morning, my anger started to grow at what she had done. I realized as I was drinking my coffee this morning that I had done nothing to deserve this disrespect from her. I also realized that there was nothing I could have done to prevent what she did. This was all on her. If I had somehow managed to stop her date last night, she would have just done it again another time. There are a lot of people who say you can't stop loving someone suddenly. Perhaps they are right. What you can do is turn that love into disappointment. The opposite of love is not hate, it is indifference. With hate, there is still strong emotion involved. Marriage counselors often can save a marriage if there is hate by rekindling love. If there is indifference, there is no chance at all. All my love that I had for my wife yesterday before I got home had now turned into disappointment. It was remarkably simple to feel. All I needed to do was focus on the lack of respect she showed me. Then I considered her threats to me if I didn't go along with it. Adding to that was her dismissive attitude towards my feelings. I had several hours to think about all that. "Honey, where are you?" "I'm home just like I said. I even cleaned up before coming home for you, honey." I heard her calling out as she searched the house for me. "Oh, there you are," she said as she opened the door to my office. "I'm back, and now everything can go back to normal," she continued as she approached my desk. She moved around the desk with her arms out to give me a hug. I pushed her back gently. Her eyes widened in shock. I had never talked to her like that in all the years we've known each other. I continued before she could even think about responding. "I need to go to the clinic and get a full checkup done. I want to see a medical report confirming that you are healthy before we even think about being close again." Over the top? Probably. Did I care? Nope. I watched her shocked expression turn to anger. I was hoping for her to realize what she had done and feel remorse. I can see that you are still dealing with your hurt feelings. I'm going to go up to our room and take a nap. I had a long night and I want to rest for a while. Hopefully you will have calmed down and we can talk later. I expect a sincere apology for your rudeness this morning." With that, she turned and stormed out of the room. I couldn't help but smile as I anticipated her quick return. I was not to be disappointed. "What the heck did you do?" I heard screamed as she was charging back. "Where are your clothes? Where are all your toiletries? What in the world do you think you are doing?" She ranted as she stormed back into my office. "What do you mean?" I asked calmly. "All my things are exactly where they are supposed to be." "What are you talking about? Your closet is empty. Your drawers are empty. Your area on the vanity is empty. What do you mean that everything is where it is supposed to be?" As I said, "My clothes are neatly hanging in my closet or folded and in my dresser. My toiletries are sitting neatly where they belong in my bathroom." "They are not. I just told you that your stuff is not in our bedroom," she exclaimed in exasperation. "I see. You see, you are still mistakenly thinking of your bedroom as our bedroom. I just told you that all of my stuff is where it belongs in my bedroom." "You mean? Yes, I told you that I would not put up with it, so I moved out of your bedroom. I'll be staying in my new bedroom until I find an apartment and move out." I thought about telling her about our finances, but forget it. Let her find out on her own. Besides, no sense in spoiling the surprise before I can take care of the investments. Her eyes narrowed in irritation. "We will discuss this later. I will give you a week to get over your little fit. Then I expect you to move everything back and we will go back to normal." "Not until I have that notarized report stating that you are free from all diseases." I shot back as I turned my attention back to the computer. I stayed in my office for most of the day. The kids came home early in the afternoon. I briefly wondered how long it would take them to figure out that there was a problem. I found a few apartments that looked good, so I filled out the forms and scheduled appointments to look at them on Tuesday. I then printed out our financial statements. I would need that for the lawyer on Monday. While I was under no illusions about having the house sold, I figured that getting a value on it might help in the settlement. Theoretically, she would owe me half the value of the equity. Wishful thinking, but still. I spent the remainder of the day researching the divorce laws in our state. I knew that I was going to get in trouble, but at least I would have some sort of idea of how bad. That would help me plan if nothing else. "Hi, Dad. Dinner is ready," Carly said as she stuck her head in the door. "Okay, sweetie. Thank you." Kayla was smiling brightly when I stepped into the kitchen. It was obvious what the plan here was. Getting me upset and showing me what I would be losing by not accepting what she had done. She had gone all out. She had dressed up and put on her makeup. Her hair was done in the style I liked. She had spent some considerable time in the kitchen that afternoon to make my favorite meal. As I entered the kitchen, she came over to me and handed me a glass of lemonade. "I poured you a glass of lemonade," she said as she handed it to me and leaned in for a hug. I saw the hurt in her eyes as I leaned away from her. I took the glass from her, walked over to the sink, poured it out, and set the glass on the counter. I then pulled a tumbler out of the cabinet, put a couple ice cubes in it, then poured a couple fingers of iced tea in it. There was no way that the kids sitting at the table didn't notice that. Moving over to the table, I sat down and began chatting with the kids. I never even acknowledged my wife. Dinner was obviously strained. I kept up the conversations as much as possible with the kids, but it was blatantly obvious that there were serious problems. It didn't help that I never even put anything on my plate, much less ate anything. These dishes were my favorites, but I just passed the bowls and platters along without even looking at them. I just continued to try and make conversation with my kids as I sipped my drink. "Dad, aren't you going to eat anything?" Josh finally asked. "Nope. Not hungry," was all I replied. After the most awkward dinner in the history of mankind, I simply got up, refilled my drink, and headed back to my office. I didn't even bother to help clear the table. About half an hour later, I shut down the computer, got the keys to my truck, then left the house to go to a nice quiet restaurant for dinner. After that, I went over to the bar for a couple of drinks. It was pretty late by the time I got back home. I saw that the light was still on in Kayla's bedroom, so I made sure that when I closed the door to my room, it made enough noise that she would hear it. I locked the door, then slid a chair under the knob. As I was getting ready for bed, I heard her try the knob, then knock. She tried to get me to open the door for about 5 minutes before finally giving up. I was up early the next morning. I decided that today would be a football day. There were 3 games on morning, afternoon, and night, and I would watch them all. Yeah, there were weekend chores to do, but I decided to ignore them. Forget it. I wouldn't be living here much longer, so Kayla could just get someone else to do it. I had already drunk most of the pot of coffee and began getting ready to make omelets for breakfast. I had already finished mine when Carly came wandering into the kitchen. "Hey, sweetie, omelet?" I asked. "Sure, Dad." "Thanks." She got her juice and sat at the table as I began cooking her food. A few minutes later, Josh made his appearance. I told him I would make his as soon as I was finished with his sisters. Carly was eating her omelet as I was cooking Josh's. I heard Kayla in the hallway, so I poured the last cup of coffee in my cup and turned the pot off. She came shuffling in, got a cup from the cabinet, then looked at the empty pot. "You couldn't even leave a cup for me?" She glared at me. "Pot's right there. You know how to make it. Whatever." "So you are making omelets then? Made them?" "Just finished, but feel free to make yourself one," I answered as I slipped Josh's onto his plate. I used the last of what I had made for his. I had even already put all the ingredients away. Forget her. Having taken care of the kids, I left the kitchen. It was just before noon. I was in the living room with the morning game on. Kayla came in carrying a plate and a bottle of water. She set it down on the coffee table in front of me. "I brought you some lunch and a water so you wouldn't miss any of the game," she said cheerfully. Without so much as a glance at her, I took my foot and swept both plate and bottle off the table and onto the floor. She just stood there with her mouth open in shock. Just then, a commercial came on, so I stood up, walked into the kitchen, and got myself a water. Yes, I hear all you out there crying about wasting water by spilling it out onto the floor. I wasn't going to drink anything that she brought me, so it would have been wasted anyway. No, I didn't clean up the mess. She brought it in unwanted, so she can clean it up herself. I didn't care if it stained the carpet. I wasn't going to be living there very much longer anyway. "We need to discuss this," Kayla began. "Shut up. The game's on," I replied. "For goodness sake, you need to do something about your attitude. The kids have already noticed." It was bound to happen. I'm sure they would notice after I move out anyway. "Oh, get over yourself. You are not moving out, and there will not be a divorce," she insisted as she stormed away. It started later in the afternoon. At least they were nice enough to wait until halftime. Carly and Josh came into the room together. They sat on the couch to face me. "Dad, what's going on between you and Mom?" Carly began. "Well, you may as well know now. Your mother and I are going through a separation. This has nothing to do with either of you. We both love you. This is just between your mother and me." "But why?" Josh asked. "Because your mother did something that I just cannot accept. She did it even after I told her my feelings on it, but she still did it. She wasn't even the least bit remorseful for it." "You mean when she went out on her date Friday night?" Carly asked. "You know about that?" I was actually surprised. "Well, yeah, Mom told us that you weren't happy about it." "So, you know that she made a mistake then?" "No, she didn't. She said that she told you about it beforehand, so it wasn't a mistake. She didn't sneak around behind your back to do it, and that was the only time she has ever done anything like that." Josh explained, "Yeah, Dad. Besides, it was only one night out of the 20 years of you two dating and being married. She said that if you really loved her, you would just let her have that one night and move on." Carly added. I was honestly surprised. It also hurt that my daddy's girl was not even bothering to understand my position. She had jumped over onto her mother's side and wouldn't even listen to my point of view. Really? How about if she really loved me, she wouldn't even consider being involved with anyone else? Come on, Dad. It was just one time, and she promised that she would never do it again. Okay, let's discuss her promises then. A little over 17 years ago, she made a solemn vow to me. She made that vow before God, our families, and our friends. She vowed to forsake all others. There were no exception clauses in that vow. The time limit on that vow was until death do us part. In case you haven't noticed, neither one of us is dead. If she can so easily break that solemn vow she made so publicly, how can I possibly believe any promise that she makes to me in private? Yeah, but you also vowed to support her in good times and in bad times. Josh had been thinking of becoming a lawyer. I hope he gets a lot better at it than that. That's true. The issue is that your mother breaking her vow broke the contract and released me from my vows. Well, we just don't understand why you would break up the family over one mistake, Carly asked. Why are you saying that I'm breaking up the family? Why am I getting blamed for what she did? Mom isn't leaving. She wants to put this behind us and move on. You are the one leaving and making such a big deal out of everything. If you leave, you are breaking up the family. Carly insisted. It didn't get any better after that. I tried to explain my position, but they weren't listening. They weren't even slightly interested in my opinion. Kayla had spent the last day filling their heads with her lies. All they knew was that Mommy did something that she really needed to do, and Daddy didn't love her or the kids enough to accept her needs. She convinced them that Daddy's little pride was causing him to walk out on all of them and break up the family. It was Daddy's fault because he couldn't give Mommy one little, tiny thing that she really needed for her happiness. Instead, Daddy was intent on making everyone suffer for his stubbornness. Really, it was just one night out of the 20 years that they had been together. Seriously, what is one night out of 7,305 nights, 20 years, at 365 days per year, plus the one extra day on the 5 leap years? They finally stormed out when it was obvious that I was not going to accept their position. I managed to watch the rest of the game in peace. As the game was ending, I began smelling the aromas of dinner being prepared. It was obviously another of my favorites. I just sat there and watched the after-game show as I waited for the night game. It was the top of the hour kickoff would be in 20 minutes. Josh came in to tell me that dinner was ready. I simply got up, grabbed the keys to my truck, and began heading for the door. Where are you going? Dinner is being set on the table, Josh asked. I'm going down to the sports bar to watch the game. I'll eat something there, I replied. But Mom cooked. I'll be back after the game. I might hang out for a while after it's over though. I did hang out after the game. They had a really good burger with seasoned fries. The soda was pretty good too. I only had about 1 soda per quarter, so I was still pretty good to drive. Besides, it was only about 5 minutes from home. Everyone was in bed by the time I got home, so I simply went to my bedroom, locked and blocked the door, and went to sleep. The plate and bottle by the coffee table had been cleaned up by the time I got home. That made me smile. Monday morning, I was up early and out of the house before anyone got up. The first thing I did when I got to the office was to call my broker. I explained that I was going to get a divorce and needed him to split all of our investments right down the middle. He created a new account in just my name and moved half our investments into that account. Next up, HR. I took Kayla's name off my retirement account and had them just put Carly and Josh on as my heirs. I also gave them my new bank account information to reroute my paycheck to there. Finally, I went and informed my boss that I was about to get divorced, so I would be needing some time off for meeting with my lawyer, court dates, meetings, etc. He was cool with it. My lawyer pretty much told me what I already knew. I had the short straw, so I would be dealing with a challenging situation. There was a slight chance that I could get custody, but that was completely dependent on where the kids wanted to live. They were old enough that the court would take their wishes into serious consideration. Based upon the conversation I had with them yesterday, I was not going to count on that. Basically, the only reason for a guy to even have a lawyer for a divorce was for the lawyer to be able to prepare them for the difficulties. Otherwise, they would be at a disadvantage. I had him start on the paperwork and asked that he have her served at work on Monday. I didn't even bother going home right after work. It was Monday Night Football, so I just drove over to the sports bar. 3 tacos for $1. I had 3 during the first half and 3 more during the second half. I ignored the text messages and phone calls from Kayla. I did respond to Carly and let her know where I was. Her response to that was not exactly pleasant. I was given the evil eye by all 3 when I sauntered in after the game. I simply went into my office and closed the door. By the time I was done and went up to my room, everyone had gone to bed. Tuesday morning, I was up early and out of the house before anyone else was up again. Work was okay, and I took the afternoon off to look at the apartments. I decided on a nice 2-bedroom unit and put down the deposit. I would be able to move in on Saturday. A trip to a second-hand store netted me a couch, table, and chairs. They were to be delivered on Saturday afternoon. I decided that I liked the bed that I was using, so I was going to take that as well as everything in my home office. They were eating dinner by the time I got home. I snickered when I noticed that they didn't even set a plate for me. That was fine with me. I wasn't going to eat it anyway. I simply went to the refrigerator and pulled out the ingredients for a huge sandwich. After making my sandwich, I grabbed a bag of chips and a soda, then went into my office. "Geez, Dad, why are you being such a jerk?" Carly exclaimed as she came into my office. "Well, Carly, simply put, your mother had an affair. She completely disrespected me. Then, She threw it in my face. I will not put up with that. I very clearly explained what would happen if she went through with it. She went through with it even knowing what would happen. You can't seriously be breaking up the family over that. Come on. It was nothing. It was just a mistake. Carly, someday you are going to be married. Just think about how you would feel if your husband told you one evening that he had a date with another woman and he was going to spend the night with her. Well, I'm sure I wouldn't like it very much, but if he promised to come back to me and it was just a one-time thing, I would hope that I would love him enough to get past it. Besides, if he told me about it first, it wouldn't be like he was cheating. Sure. Do me one favor. When you get married, look directly into your groom's eyes as you are saying your vows. As you are looking into his loving eyes, when you get to the part about forsaking all others, imagine the love in those eyes turning to utter devastation as you tell him that you are going out to be with another person. With that, I turned my back on her and went back to work. Wednesday evening was the intervention. Both sets of parents were there when I got home from work. People often joke about their in-laws, but I actually got along very well with her parents. They had welcomed me into their family like the son they never had. Charles, her father, was a gearhead like me. His only problem was that he was into Fords. Okay, so he had extremely poor taste in cars, but I could overlook that. He had a '69 Mustang Fastback that was in pristine condition. Yes, I got along very well with my parents as well. We were not one of those dysfunctional families that the kids grew up hating their parents. They were always very loving and supportive of me. Sure, there were disagreements, and they never hesitated to tell me when they thought I was wrong about something. Sometimes we just had to agree to disagree. So, I walked into the house and saw the intervention had been set up. I was a bit confused. I understood why her parents would be there. Obviously, they would be on her side. She is their daughter, after all. What confused me was that my own parents were there. That would seem to be counterproductive to her. My parents would agree with me and be on my side. I mean, if she were trying to get me to accept her affair, why would she have anyone over that wouldn't be on her side, and who would argue that I should stay married to her? You probably already figured out what took me several more minutes to understand. Tom Charles started the intervention. I want you to know that Kayla's mother and I are very disappointed in what Kayla did. That being said, we think that you are overreacting to this. Yes, she went out and had an affair, and that was highly disrespectful to you, especially in the way she did it. Still, it was just one mistake. You two have been together for a total of 20 years. You have 2 wonderful kids together. Think about all of that. Surely you can get over this one small incident. Don't tear your family apart just for one mistake. A small mistake? Seriously? This wasn't a small mistake. She didn't accidentally stumble and end up in bed with another person. This was a planned event. They probably planned it at least a week in advance. Then she ambushes me only an hour before she was leaving, giving me no chance to fight it. This was a deliberate plan to cheat on me. Mom decided to enter the conversation. She didn't cheat on you. She told you about it first. Huh? What? First off, you are correct that she told me. Told me. She never asked, she just said that she was doing it and I had no say about it. Even when I voiced my strong objections, she didn't care. Speaking of telling, I did tell her that this would happen if she went through with it. Tom, my dad, tried. I understand your pain and anger, but think about the family. We love you, son. We will be here to help you heal, but think of what you will be doing to your family. Kayla still loves you and she has insisted that she won't do it again. We all think that with counseling and some effort, you can get past this. Tearing your family apart is not the way to go. We raised you to be a good man. You need to be strong and keep your family together. Don't do something foolish that will end up hurting your relationship with your family. Think about your mother and me too. Those are our grandchildren, and we will do whatever is necessary to keep our relationship with them. I just stood there completely stunned. My parents were actually taking her side. They were really telling me that I should overlook her dishonesty. I simply couldn't take any more of this. I turned and walked out of the room and went to my bedroom. Kayla tried to follow me, but I shut the door in her face. 10 minutes later, I had changed into jeans, a casual shirt, and my boots. I never said a word as I walked right through the living room and out the front door. They were still all sitting there trying to talk to me as I walked past. I never even acknowledged them. I simply walked out the door, got in my truck, and went to the sports bar for dinner and a few drinks. Thankfully, the house was quiet and dark when I returned about 4 hours later. Thursday and Friday were just more of the same. I completely ignored Kayla, and my kids remained mad at me. I was kind of surprised that Kayla had not yet noticed that the credit cards were no longer working. I'm pretty sure that when she went to do her Saturday shopping, she would figure it out. It was Friday evening. I had been home for about an hour. I was in my office going through a few things and deciding exactly what I would be taking tomorrow and what I would get later. Kayla opened the door and walked in. She was wearing a see-through nightgown, stockings, garter belt, and heels. I have to say, she looked fantastic. The kids are spending the night elsewhere tonight. It's time for you to get over this situation and come to bed with me. I want you to spend quality time with me all night. I really need you to take me back. I looked at her for a minute. No thanks. Besides, I have yet to see a report from the clinic verifying that you don't have any diseases. Look, if you don't, then I'm going to have to call Clarence again. So much for that thing then. Darn it. It was a one-time thing, but if you are going to keep rejecting me, it's you that is pushing me back to someone else. Have fun. Let me know if you are bringing him here so I can leave. The steam coming out of her ears and nose as she stormed out of the room took a few minutes to clear. About half an hour later, I heard the front door slam. She practically burned her tires off as she sped down the street. I took the opportunity of an empty house to pack up a few things. I took the bed apart and loaded it in the truck along with most of my clothes. I would sleep on the sofa in my office tonight. Having everything I wanted to take first loaded in my truck, I fixed a gym beam on the rocks and relaxed. The sofa wasn't the most comfortable thing I've slept on, but it was okay. Early the next morning, I was at the leasing office and got the key to the apartment. It took me a bit, but I managed to get everything out of the truck and into the apartment. Thankfully, a couple of friendly neighbors assisted. No one was home yet when I returned, so I had a neighbor's teenage son help me load up my desk and office furniture. My computer, printer, and accessories went into the cab. I looked back into the living room and thought, forget it. I'm taking the recliner too. I guess that either no one got home until that evening, or no one bothered to look into my office or the spare bedroom. I'm surprised that they didn't notice the missing recliner though. It was early evening before my phone rang. Seeing that it was my daughter, I answered it. Daddy, where are you? I'm at home, sweetheart. No, you aren't. Your office is cleaned out. The bed and dresser in the spare bedroom are gone, and your recliner isn't in the living room. Besides, I looked everywhere, and you aren't here. Plus, your truck is gone. You are right. I'm not there. I am at home. I don't live there anymore. I moved into an apartment for now. Maybe after the divorce is final, I'll get another house, but this will do for now. Oh, Dad, I can't believe that you were being such a jerk about this. I thought you loved us. I do love you, sweetie. I always have and always will. Just not enough to not leave us. I'm not leaving you. You will still be able to see me all you want. I'll still take care of you and your brother. You are leaving us. You left us and are breaking up the family. Your mother is the one that broke up the family. I told her this is what would happen if she went out on that date. She did it anyway, but she thought you loved her enough to get past that. And I thought she loved me enough to not do it. Fine. Whatever. Then she hung up. Yeah, the divorce was a nightmare. She fought it all the way. Counseling. She wanted me to pay. I refused. I argued that if she wanted it, she should pay for it. That was one of the few arguments I won. What a waste of time. The counselor didn't like me very much. I think it had something to do with me telling him that I was ordered to attend, but the judge said nothing about me actually participating. I suffered through all 12 sessions before the counselor finally gave up. She fought over literally everything. That worthless funny poster that was in the garage that she absolutely despised. Suddenly, she simply couldn't live without it. The Bud Light lamp that I accidentally left behind in the office, she hated it, but I had that on my desk since college. It became the centerpiece that she was going to redecorate the office around. Yeah, it was all ridiculous. She was only doing that to make the divorce as hard on me as possible, all the while making it as difficult on me to see the kids as she could. Finally, the judge granted the divorce. I had to continue to pay half the mortgage. She, of course, kept the house. $2,000 a month child support, but I did get every Wednesday evening and every other weekend visitation. What really bothered me was the $1,000 a month for 5 years spousal maintenance. It would be voided if she got remarried within that time. I wasn't going to hold my breath. I found out that she had moved Clarence in with her before the divorce was even final. So yeah, half my paycheck was going to her. I cashed in some of my investments and bought a small house that was in serious need of repairs. At least I got it cheap. It even had a 1/4 acre lot. Thankfully, I managed to sneak all my tools out of the garage the week after I moved out. I refused to even discuss them. Most of them I had before we even met. When she pushed, I started talking about all her jewelry and expensive clothes and shoes. The house had electricity, gas, and running water. The roof was on it, and the walls were standing. That was good enough for me. I moved in and began working on it in the evenings and weekends. Visitation. Yeah, I was supposed to have visitation. I actually did a few times too. It was a disaster. Kayla did everything possible to interfere with it. The kids were busy. They went for a weekend thing with their friends. Funny how that was always on my weekends and not hers. Oh, Kayla has dance practice on Wednesday. Oh, Josh has a huge test on Thursday and needs to study. The few times that I was actually able to have my Wednesday evening visitation, the kids were hostile to me. They still blame me for everything, even though I explained my point of view. When the opposition has them as a captive audience literally all the time, and I only have an hour or two occasionally, it's a losing battle. After the third time, they flat out told me that they didn't want to see me anymore. Yeah, I could have forced it, but what would be the point? Forcing them to see me would have only caused more resentment. I sent them gifts, cards, and letters for their birthdays and Christmas. They were all returned unopened. I continued to send my monthly checks. I saw they were cashed, but never heard a word. Graduation? I assumed they graduated, but I never heard anything about it. I sent a registered letter letting them know about the college funds I set up for them. I did hear back on that no thanks. Kayla had successfully turned my kids against me, just like she said she would. I just concentrated on work, the house, and that's about it. I didn't go out or do anything. It's amazing how much money you can save by doing that. As if all that wasn't bad enough. Hey Mom, I said when she answered the phone. Tom, how are you doing? She responded cheerfully. Doing as well as can be expected. Anyway, I haven't heard anything about Thanksgiving. Are you hosting it again this year? There was silence on the other end. Mom, you still there? I asked. Oh, well, this is a bit awkward. Yes we are, but Kayla, her parents, and the kids are coming over for it. She's also bringing the new man in her life with her. We all just felt that having you here as well would be too awkward for everyone. After all, the kids are still upset at you for leaving them, and you being here with Kayla and her new man would just make everyone too uncomfortable. Seriously, Mom? You're leaving your own son out on Thanksgiving and inviting my ex-wife and her boyfriend instead? Well, we want to maintain our close relationship with our grandchildren. Besides, this is your fault. You should have worked to keep your family together instead of tearing it apart. How about coming over for Christmas Eve? Your father and I will be spending Christmas Day at Kayla's house, but we can celebrate it with you the day before. Whatever. I mumbled as I ended the call. I spent Christmas Eve at home watching Die Hard and ignoring the multiple calls and text messages from my mom wondering where I was. I was not in the holiday spirit. I just stared at the packages that I had sent to my kids a week ago. They had been returned to my doorstep yesterday. I did get a wedding announcement after 5 years. Kayla ended up marrying Clarence the weekend after my last maintenance payment was made. Jerk. Josh's 18th birthday was a year earlier, so I was already done with my child support. Now, I was completely free and clear of my former family and my commitments to them. I celebrated by getting drunk. Yeah, not real proud of that, but forget it. I had worked so hard and given them all the love I could, only to be rejected and treated poorly. Forget them. Now that all my obligations to the witch and her 2 ungrateful kids were completed, I decided to just put them out of my mind as much as possible. They obviously didn't want any sort of relationship with me, so I would just forget about them as much as possible and move on. Well, except for one thing that had always bugged me. I had to keep paying half the mortgage on the house. Sure, that ended when Josh graduated from high school, but my name was still on the deed. I think Kayla was under the mistaken impression that the house was hers free and clear. The divorce only said that she got to live there until the children graduated from high school. Now, all bets were off. I had a right to half of the assets, and that was a pretty big asset. I contacted my lawyer. To start off with, when we divorced, the house was appraised at around $300,000 with about $200,000 in equity. That was 5 years ago. Since then, we had been faithfully paying on the mortgage, and property values had gone up significantly in our area. By doing a bit of research online, I estimated that the appraised value was now around $500,000, and the equity was more along the line of $450,000. Yes, we only had $50,000 left on the note. Why was I doing this? Well, obviously for the money, of course. Who couldn't use an extra $250,000? Besides that, there was the fact that it would totally upset Kayla. She loved that house, and having to give me a penny for anything would cause her to go through the roof, and I wanted whatever payback I could get for what she did. This would also reimburse me for all the maintenance and mortgage payments I had to make for her. The call came about a week later. Tom, what in the world is happening? Well, Kayla, not much is happening here. Just working and fixing up the house I bought. What about you? I have to say I was surprised to hear from you. It's been a while since we talked since the divorce. You jerk. I'm not calling to check up on you. I'm calling to find out why a realtor just came to my house to look at it and get my signature on the listing contract. Oh, that. Well, it's pretty straightforward. Since both our names are on the title, she needs your signature for the sale. What sale? I love this house, and I have no intention of selling it. Then when can I expect you to give me the money for my share of the value? Nice try. I got the house in the divorce. Nope. You only got to use the house until Josh graduated from high school. That happened last month. Now we can either sell it and split the money, or you buy out my share. If you think I'm going to give you $100,000 for a house that is rightfully mine, you're out of your mind. Well, that proves that I'm not crazy. I'm not asking for $100,000. You could have done that 5 years ago. Now, since the house's value is more like $450,000, my share is $225,000. Considering the expensive furniture you insisted on, let's round it to an even $250,000. You're crazy. I'm not giving you a penny. She yelled before hanging up the phone. Yes, I had a good laugh after she hung up on me. Yes, my lawyer took his cut, but it was worth it a couple months later to see her face when the judge ruled in my favor. I even convinced the judge to make her pay the court fees and my lawyer for dragging us to court instead of settling amicably. The house was appraised for more than I expected, including the furniture, but I ended up with $275,000. They ended up buying out my share instead of selling. I later found out that most of the money they used belonged to Clarence. That would come back to haunt him, but that's a story for another time. I had managed to fix up the house and even built a nice workshop behind it. I also got my hands on an old 1972 Chevy pickup that was in rough shape. I was mainly interested in the rolling chassis since I was going to replace everything else. Over the past year, I stripped it down, cleaned it up, and gave it a fresh coat of paint. Once the paint and body work were done, I started on the engine. It was going to be a fun toy, not for everyday driving. A 427 big block. I found one at a salvage yard online, bought it, and had it shipped. After it arrived, I disassembled it and took it to a machine shop to get parts bored. New forged crankshaft, 10/1 pistons, a heavy cam, and polished heads with double springs. I added a blower on top to make it even more exciting. I even polished the aluminum on the blower and put chrome valve covers. The engine looked stunning. The first time I took it out on the road, it was almost disastrous. I was on the freeway and decided to accelerate. Big mistake. The back tires lost traction instantly. I barely managed to keep the car straight before easing off the gas. Note to self-press the accelerator pedal slowly. I drove more carefully after that. A few weeks later, I saw an advertisement for a car show that was open to the public. Thinking it would be fun, I signed up and paid the entry fee. On the big day, I loaded up my Chevy and went to the park. I checked in and was assigned a spot. While setting up, I noticed a gorgeous 1968 GTO parked next to me. I set up my shade and introduced myself to the two redheads setting chairs behind the GTO. Yes, there were two of them. One seemed about my age, and the other looked like a high school student. I didn't see anyone else with them, and the older woman didn't have a ring on her finger. Good morning. I really like your car, I said cheerfully. They both looked up from what they were doing. Hi, thank you. I also like your truck, the older redhead replied. Thanks. Have you been to many car shows? This is my first time entering one, although I've been to a few as a spectator. By the way, I'm Tom. Well, this is the third time my daughter and I have participated. My ex-husband brought it to a few shows before, though. I'm Marie, and this is my daughter Jenny. In that case, when you're done, Why don't you two come and join me in the shade? I have a cooler full of drinks, and I'd appreciate any advice you can give me about these shows. We ended up spending most of the day together. We only interrupted our conversation to talk to others about our vehicles. It was a genuinely enjoyable day. I learned that Marie had divorced her husband 3 years ago after catching him cheating on her. He was having an affair with his boss's wife. She made a deal with him she would give him all the videos in exchange for him signing the GTO over to her. She wanted to hurt him while also making sure he could keep his job and support their child. It was a double win for her. Besides, she didn't care much if his boss's wife was unfaithful. Jenny also joined in the conversation. She, too, was furious at her father's infidelity and had cut ties with him. We were having such a good time that I didn't want it to end. When the show was wrapping up, I invited them to dinner at a nearby restaurant. They accepted, and we drove over together. I didn't want to bring up negative topics, but they asked, and they had already shared their stories. I summarized the main points. I mentioned that my children took their mother's side and had distanced themselves from me. You mean your wife cheated, and your kids blame you for divorcing her? Jenny was shocked. Yes, I tried explaining things, but she had already poisoned their minds by that point. Marie put her hand on my arm. I'm so sorry, Tom. You seem like such a nice guy, and you didn't deserve any of that, she said genuinely. I decided to change the subject to something more enjoyable. We talked and laughed for another hour. We seemed to connect really well. We exchanged phone numbers, and Marie seemed open to meeting up again. As they were leaving, I saw Jenny smile, wink, and give me a thumbs up from the window. I took that as a sign that she approved of me seeing her mom again. So Marie and I did meet up again. It was the following weekend. I called and asked her, and she enthusiastically agreed. We went out for dinner and dancing. When I walked her to the door, she gave me a hug. As I turned to leave, I saw the teenager redhead in the window, giving me a big smile, a wink, and a double thumbs up. After 2 more hangouts, I invited them both over to my house and cooked them dinner. I had learned to cook pretty well after my divorce. Food Network, a few YouTube videos, and a lot of trial and error. I do make a really good lasagna, so I went with that. They seemed to like it. They really liked my house, but I did overhear Marie telling her daughter that it definitely needed a woman's touch. I wouldn't have argued if I had been asked. The next weekend, I was invited to their apartment. Marie's cooking put my feeble efforts to shame. Even Kayla wasn't as good as Marie. I couldn't help it. I know that it's rude as heck, but I just couldn't stop eating. I finally had to apologize to them for making a pig of myself. They just laughed and asked why I was apologizing. That was the biggest compliment you can give to a woman that loves to cook. She told me that Jenny was almost as good as she was. It was 2 weekends later that it happened. I had taken Marie to dinner, then a dance club. We had been dancing for a while when a slow song came up. We were pressed together as we swayed to the music. We had graduated to some pretty hot make-out sessions a few weeks ago. She leaned over and whispered in my ear, "Take me home." Frankly, I was surprised. I thought we were having a great time, but now she wanted to go home. I pulled back to look at her. She must have seen the look on my face, and she began giggling. "Oh, you silly man, I meant take me to your home." "Oh. Well then." Thankfully, I had my regular truck and not the 72. I'm not sure that I would have been able to keep the tires on the road if I was driving the 72 back home. A few months later, I asked, and she answered. It was a simple ceremony in front of a judge. They moved into my house right after we got married. Jenny even started calling me Dad. Life was great. Yes, there were disagreements. Yes, Jenny and I had our differences as well. She was still a teenager, and I was still an authority figure. I did have to say no on occasion. Still, she respected me, and her mom loved me just as much as I loved her. The surprise phone call came about a year later. It was a number that I didn't recognize. "Hello," I said as I answered the phone. "Hi, Daddy," an excited woman's voice said on the other end of the line. "Carly? Yes, Daddy, it's me, and I have great news." "Really? It's really good to hear from you." It really was good to hear from her. Maybe she was reaching out to reconnect. "I'm getting married." "That's great, sweetie. I'm so happy for you. Anyway, I want you at my wedding." "Oh, sweetie. Of course. It's one of the greatest honors for a father to walk his daughter down the aisle. And I also set up a wedding fund for you." "Oh, no. Clarence is paying for the wedding, and he will be walking me down the aisle. Also, since it would be really awkward for you and Mom to be sitting together, you wouldn't be in the front row. But I really want you to be there. Clarence, as in the person your mom cheated on me with? She actually married that person? Look, Dad, I'm trying to reconnect here, and I wanted to reach out and have you at my wedding. Besides, after you left, she and Clarence started seeing each other more, fell in love, and got married. It's actually your fault. If you hadn't abandoned us, she and Clarence would never have continued seeing each other. Okay, I can see that you are still under the impression that your mother didn't do anything wrong. So I will be unable to attend for 2 reasons. First and foremost, I simply cannot support a marriage where I'm sure it will fail. You are more likely to cheat on your husband, just like your mom cheated on me. If he is in any way someone that I would approve of, he would end the relationship as soon as he found out. Second, you have just stolen the last great honor that a father has from me and given it to a person that knowingly pursued a married woman. That just goes to show me what a selfish, self-centered person you have grown into. Fine, if that's the way you are going to be, don't expect to ever see your future children. If you raise them anything like you are, I want nothing to do with them anyway. Really, Dad? Mom is right. You really are an idiot click, and that's the last I heard of my daughter when I hung up the phone on her. Well, so much for any chance of a relationship with my former daughter. Pretty sure that there will never be a relationship with Josh either. Yeah, it hurt. They still blame me for what their mother did. I just set my phone down and made my way to the garage. Instead of wallowing in my sorrow, I would lose myself in working on the 1963 Chevy pickup I pulled out of a field a couple months ago. This one wouldn't be as flashy as my 72. I wanted to be able to drive this one a bit more. I was rebuilding a 350 that was just slightly more powerful than stock. I never even saw Jenny sneak around the corner and pick up my phone. I didn't even realize that she was home. Carly, I was so angry at my dad. Here I was trying to reach out to him, and he has the nerve to talk to me like that? It was his fault that our family was torn apart. I tried to be nice and invite him to my wedding, and he just throws everything back in my face. I was hoping that he would finally acknowledge his actions and take responsibility for what he did to our family. I looked down and saw my phone ringing. I didn't recognize the number, but there were a lot of calls like that when planning a wedding. Hello. Hi. Is this Carly Williams? Yes. Can I help you? Yes, you can. You can stop calling my daddy and being a mean person to him. He is the best man that I have ever known, and he doesn't deserve you bothering him and reminding him of the negative things you think about him. I swear, you and your family are a waste of space. Who are you? My name is Jenny Williams. I'm your sister. My mom married your former dad, and he adopted me. I love him with all my heart, and I would never even think of disrespecting or dishonoring him in any way. You are an insult to daughters all over the world. I know all about what happened. Your mom went out on a date completely disrespecting her husband and spent time with another man. The really sad part about all that is that you seem to be okay with that. Let me tell you, my biological dad cheated on my mom. She didn't even hesitate to end their relationship. You can also bet that if my mom ever cheated on my dad, I would be right there supporting my dad and helping him through it. Yes, even though he isn't my biological father, he is the most decent, caring, compassionate person I've ever met. I'm thinking of sending your mom a thank you card for being so foolish as to let him go. If it weren't for her poor decisions, I wouldn't have him as a father now. Oh, and you can also tell your grandparents that they have another granddaughter. But I have absolutely no desire to have any sort of relationship with anyone who rejects their own son for someone who cheated on him and her backstabbing child. There's one more thing that you can do for me. As you are saying your vows, look into your husband's eyes and think about if he ever decides to betray your trust. When he actually does betray you, call me and tell me about it so I can laugh at you. Have a miserable life, sis. Click, she hung up. I just stared at the phone in shock. First off, I was surprised to hear that my dad got married. You would think that he would at least send his children an invitation. Then hearing that I now had a younger sister as well. There was a strange thought that flew into my mind. I couldn't help thinking that she sounded a lot like me before Mom told Josh and me about how Dad was leaving and could potentially break up the family over one small issue. I had thought at first that Dad must have a valid reason, and I was considering the possibility of living with him instead of Mom. Then Mom explained her side of the story, and just like that, my perspective changed. After all, it was only a short period of time compared to how long they had been together. Besides, Mom was willing to stay together and work things out. It was Dad who wanted to leave. He was the one breaking up our family. I couldn't believe how rude she was to me either. She never even gave me the chance to tell her that it was Dad who left us, and that Mom was trying to move forward. It was like she didn't even care that it was just a one-time thing that shouldn't have even mattered in the grand scheme of their relationship. Then she has the nerve to call me all those terrible names. She doesn't even know me. And what was my dad getting so upset about? Of course, Clarence was going to walk me down the aisle. After all, he has been there for me for the last several years. I haven't even talked to Dad since Josh and I confronted him about his decision to leave. Besides, Clarence was paying almost $20,000 for my wedding. I couldn't even imagine how far the amount Dad could contribute would go. I was still upset about those phone calls a half an hour later when Mom and both grandmothers came in. They had been out shopping. Mom immediately noticed my mood. "Honey, what's wrong?" I told Dad about the wedding and asked him to come. After all, I am his only daughter, and I thought that he would want to be at my wedding. I kind of hoped that maybe this would be an opportunity to rebuild our relationship. "Oh, that's wonderful," Grandma Williams exclaimed. "Will he be there?" "We haven't heard from him since he called about Thanksgiving a few years ago." I sighed. "No." He got angry when I told him that Clarence would be walking me down the aisle and that I thought it would be too awkward for him to sit in the front row with Mom and Clarence. "Oh, that's too bad." I thought that he would have moved past his stubbornness by now. Well, if that's not bad enough, I found out that I have a stepsister about 5 minutes later. "What?" They all exclaimed in unison. "Yeah, a girl who said that her name was Jenny Williams called me a few minutes after Dad hung up on me. Apparently, Dad married her mom and adopted her. She was not very nice on the phone. In fact, the nicest thing she said was that she wanted to thank my mom for being foolish, otherwise she wouldn't have such a fantastic daddy. I recounted both phone calls to them. They were shocked at the anger that came from Dad and Jenny. Tom got married and we weren't invited to the wedding. He never even told us about it. I have another granddaughter, Grandma Williams whispered to herself. The day of my wedding finally arrived. I briefly thought about what my dad had said and had a moment of sadness that he wouldn't be here on my special day. Oh well, I had reached out to him and he had rejected me. I shrugged it off. After all, this was a happy day. I was going to marry the man I truly loved. The man I was going to spend the rest of my life with. Clarence was beaming in happiness as he took my arm, and we began walking up the aisle to the music of the wedding march. I was overjoyed as I took in all my friends and family. Both sets of my grandparents were there. Josh was one of Bobby's groomsmen. Everyone was here to celebrate my special day. Tears of joy began to form in my eyes. I looked ahead and saw my Bobby smiling at me as he stood before the minister. As we passed my mother, I could see her beaming at me with pride. She too had tears of joy beginning to slide down her cheeks. Clarence lifted my veil, hugged me, and said, "Congratulations, baby." He then handed me off to my soon-to-be husband. I had a strange feeling in my head when the minister asked, "Who gives this bride away?" And Clarence said, "Her mother and I do." Something didn't sound right, but I couldn't understand why at that moment. That soon passed as the minister began the ceremony. I was gazing into the eyes of the love of my life. I was repeating my vows, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, through good times and bad. Forza ... Forza. I couldn't say it. I was staring straight into Bobby's eyes, and I simply couldn't say it. I suddenly thought about what that mean person had said over the phone. I was staring into the eyes of my soulmate and suddenly saw him with another woman. The picture suddenly changed. Now I was looking into the dull eyes of a broken man as I told him that I had made a terrible mistake. These pictures were flashing through my mind. The words came out without a thought. I understand now. If I had thought that we had the full attention of the audience before, that was nothing compared to what it was now. Bobby was looking at me with concern. Suddenly, it felt as if a weight had lifted. I got the biggest smile on my face that I had ever had. I finally understand. I said to Bobby, That's really great, Carly, but what do you suddenly understand?" "Absolutely everything," I answered. Then I got serious. "Bobby, do you really love me?" "Of course I love you." "How can you even ask that?" "I have to ask that because I can't marry you today." I swear, I could feel the rush of air blow past me as the entire audience gasped in shock. "We will still get married, but not today. This isn't right, and I have to make it right. I'm only getting married once, and it will be for life, so I need to do it right." Baby, what's wrong? Bobby, I love you with everything I have. I am going to marry you. I will explain everything to you, and you will understand completely. But we need to go and begin fixing things. We will reschedule and have our wedding. You're not leaving me at the altar, are you? Not a chance. In fact, you need to come with me. With that, I turned to the guests. I'm truly sorry about this, but I just can't go through with this today. We are not canceling our wedding, we are simply postponing it. We will let you all know when we schedule the new date. We will understand if you decide not to attend. But just think about what a story you will have about today for years to come. Wouldn't you want to show up next time to see what happens then? Anyway, to try and make up for some of your disappointment, the reception hall should be ready. Everything is already paid for with non-refundable deposits, so why not go ahead and take advantage of that? It's an open bar, so eat, drink, dance, and party. Don't worry, Clarence is paying for everything. With that, I grabbed Bobby's hand and began to head back down the aisle. Suddenly, my mother was blocking my exit, and Clarence was standing there beside her. He didn't exactly look pleased that I just wasted over $20,000. I also noticed that all the guests were now focused on this new confrontation. Those that had stood up to begin making their way to the reception had stopped in their tracks to witness the next show. Clarence began shouting a bunch of nonsense about the money he spent and that I was going to pay him back every cent for this stunt that I just pulled. Then it was Mom's turn. "Carly, what are you doing? Where are you going?" she asked. "What I'm doing is fixing a mistake I made several years ago." What mistake? The biggest mistake of my life. The mistake I made when I listened to all that nonsense you spouted off instead of helping my daddy throw your terrible rear end out to the curb. The mistake I made when I blamed my daddy for breaking up the family, when it was all your fault for cheating on him. Carly, I am your mother. I'm not terrible, and you will speak to me with respect. Really, Mother? You're not terrible? Once a cheater, always a cheater. Carly, how dare you? How dare me? I'm actually ashamed that I looked up to you. It wasn't until I was looking into Bobby's eyes as I was saying my vows that I woke up and realized what a horrible person you really are. Once a cheater, always a cheater. As I looked into his eyes, I suddenly realized how terrible it would be if he ever cheated on me. I realized how much I would hurt the man I love if I ever cheated on him. I guess Dad was a pretty good role model for me after all. You sure as heck weren't. What yet? I could see a bit of fear in her eyes. Seriously, Mom? Do you think that I don't know about your Wednesday afternoon workouts with Jim Davis, your personal trainer? How they always happen at his apartment instead of at the gym. Funny how you only go to the gym to see Jim. How about how it takes Carlos, your pool boy, an extra hour every 2 weeks because he is giving you a massage after he cleans the pool? What about your hanging out with the landscape crew every time after they have finished the yard work? I have some nice videos of that from when I came home early a couple of times in case you try to deny it. And let's not forget how you always tip Mario, your hairstylist, with a backroom haircut after every hair appointment. At least Clarence is your boss at work, and he doesn't have to worry about you cheating on him with your boss. Am I leaving anyone out? Oh yeah, I almost forgot about Alan Morris, your neighbor. He's been coming over whenever his wife has her girls' night out for the last 3 years. Her eyes darted over to Clarence after I finished airing her dirty laundry. Maybe she hoped that he miraculously hadn't heard any of that, even though I said it loud enough to carry through the entire church. And he was standing less than 2 feet away. Clarence had a look of utter shock on his face. I had an evil thought just then as I looked at Clarence. Oh, and Clarence? In front of God and all these witnesses, I vow with the same commitment that my mom had when she made her wedding vows that I will pay you back for the money you spent for this wedding. We all know how she keeps her vows, so you can fully expect me to honor that vow as much as she honors hers. Yeah, he shouldn't hold his breath waiting for so much as a penny. Seeing that Mom was distracted, I pulled Bobby down the aisle. I made a quick stop to talk to the videographer. Yes, he caught the entire thing on camera. He had a big smile on his face as he handed me a copy of the video. He was set up to make a duplicate copy just in case something happened to the original. I quickly scribbled my signature on a release form to allow him to post it online. I was hoping that it would go viral and increase my mom's shame. Bobby and I dashed out to the parking lot. He had driven his car here, and our bags were in the trunk. We were planning on switching them to the limo before leaving the reception. His brother was going to drive it back to his apartment after the reception. I smiled knowing that Daddy was really going to like Bobby as I slid into the passenger's seat. I got instantly excited as he turned the ignition, and that powerful engine rumbled to life. Sure, it wasn't the same brand, but the 1969 Challenger was still a stunning car. "Where are we going?" he asked as we sped out of the parking lot. "Go west on 156. I'll find the address and put it in Waze," I answered as I began working my phone. It wasn't difficult. He wasn't really trying to hide, after all. I knew the town he lived in, and a search of property records gave me the answers I needed. It was about 2 hours away. Now, I just hoped that he was home when we got there. We didn't stop to change. I was on a mission, and I didn't want to waste time. Tom, it's not a very normal occurrence when you open your front door and see a woman in a wedding dress and a man in a tuxedo standing on your porch. If you happen to be a minister and actually lived at the church, I suppose it would happen occasionally. The problem here was that I was not a minister, and I sure as heck didn't live at a church. Even more surprising was that I actually knew who one of them was. I had no clue who the man was, but that was sure as heck my oldest daughter standing there. My oldest daughter, who made it abundantly clear that she never wanted to see me again. I did seem to recall that today was her wedding day, but I couldn't figure out why she would be here. She should either be at the church, reception, or on her way to her honeymoon. Standing on my doorstep was the last place she should have been. "Daddy, can I talk to you for a minute, please?" she asked in a very small voice. Still being stunned, I moved back and allowed them to enter. I gestured to the living room where Marie and Jenny were sitting. I noticed the shocked looks on their faces as well. Carly, this is my wife Marie and our daughter Jenny." "Jenny, Marie, this is Carly. I'm sorry, but I do not know who the guy with her is, though." "Oh, yes. Daddy, this is my fiance, Bobby Jensen. Bobby, this is my daddy, Tom Williams, his wife Marie, and my sister Jenny," Carly introduced. "Fiance? I thought that he would be your husband by now. Didn't you get married a couple hours ago?" I was confused. "That's what I need to talk to you about. I couldn't go through with it today. I can't get married unless my daddy walks me down the aisle." "Daddy, I finally understand. You are right. You were always right. I'm sorry for being caught up in Mom's nonsense and blaming you. It was Mom that threw everything away, not you abandoning us. I'm sorry for everything that I said and did. You didn't deserve any of that. I won't make any excuses for my behavior, because there really isn't an excuse, except being young, foolish, and listening to the wrong people. I just hope that you can somehow find it in your heart to forgive me and to let me back into your life. I really, really want to marry Bobby. He is a really great guy, and I know you are going to like him. I just can't marry him unless you agree to walk me down the aisle and give me away." Well, this was completely unexpected. I probably should have focused on other things, but there seemed to be an elephant or two in the room. Even though I was really happy that my daughter had decided that I was not the person who abandoned them and wanted me back into her life, my overriding curiosity at the scene before me demanded some attention. "So, Carly, Mom, did something happen at the wedding? I mean, you were wearing your wedding dress and Bobby is in his tux, so I'm assuming that you were actually at the wedding." She looked down at herself, then over to her fiancé. "Oh, yes, we were actually about halfway through the ceremony when I had an epiphany. Here," she said as she handed me a CD. "Maybe you should watch this as Bobby and I change into regular clothes." Bobby ran out to the car and grabbed a suitcase while Marie showed Carly to a bedroom for them to change in. As that was happening, I set up the video player hooked up to the big screen in the living room. As soon as Carly and Bobby were set, Marie came back and sat beside me while I pushed play on the remote. It started off as a typical wedding ceremony. The groomsmen escorted the bridesmaids down the aisle, then split at the altar. Bobby came in with the minister, ring bearer, then flower girl. Finally, Clarence was escorting Carly to the altar. It was all pretty typical until Carly began reciting her vows. Even that was normal to a point. Suddenly, she seemed to have some trouble talking. It seemed that she was stuck on one word. She did it. I can't believe that she actually did it, and that it actually hit her like that. Jenny whispered to herself. I was about to ask her what she was talking about when Carly stopped trying to say her vows and changed everything. We watched the video as she stopped the wedding and then confronted her mom. I was shocked at her revelations. Apparently, her cheating had escalated after she married Clarence. Carly and Bobby had changed and returned to the living room by the time that the video ended. I just couldn't go through with it. I was looking into Bobby's eyes and realized how hurt he would be if I did to him what Mom had done to you. I finally understood what forsaking all others really meant, and that Mom broke that vow. That's when I realized how badly she had dishonored you, and that I was dishonoring you by getting married without you being in the place of honor you deserve. I mean, how can I make those solemn vows in a ceremony where the two most dishonorable people I know are in a place of honor? How can those vows have any real meaning when the most honorable person I know is not involved? I realized that if I was to really mean those vows that I am taking, it needs to be my daddy, the person who actually taught me values and integrity, that walks me down the aisle and gives me away. I decided that when I marry Bobby, it needs to be you there, not Mom and Clarence. Carly paused for a minute, then smiled and looked over at Jenny. Besides, I need my little sister to be one of my bridesmaids. It was your kick in my rear that woke me up. I remembered what you said to me when I looked into Bobby's eyes as I was trying to recite my vows. How can I possibly get married if you were not standing up there for me? This was a lot to take in. We talked for several more hours. I hadn't known that Jenny had gotten Carly's phone number from my phone just after I went out to my workshop after Carly had called me that day. She went into her room and called Carly on her own phone a few minutes later. It got late, so I had them stay in the guest bedroom for the night. Carly had a couple of phone calls throughout the evening. She ignored the calls from Clarence and Kayla, but a couple of her friends called too. It seemed that several of the guests took her up on the offer to party away on Clarence's dime. He tried to cancel it, but it was too late for him to get his money back. By the time he got to the reception venue, there were already a few dozen people taking advantage of the open bar. The food was already being prepared as well, and all the servers, bartenders, and DJ were already there and working. Clarence finally gave up, got a drink, and moved to a table in the corner to drown his sorrows. Josh sent her a video he had taken on his phone when his mom went over to try and talk to Clarence. It didn't look like it went very well. There was a lot of yelling from Clarence. The words cheating jerk took a big part of the conversation. It looked like that relationship was about to end as well. Josh said that he did manage to cancel the flight and resort reservations, but he was stuck with a 20% cancellation fee for late cancellation. Since Carly and Bobby had already taken the time off work for their honeymoon, they stayed with us for the entire week. I got to reconnect with the daughter that I thought I lost. I also got to know Bobby. He's a great guy with strong moral values. It was a bit strained at first, since the only things he had heard about me were lies told to him by my ex-wife, son, and daughter. Well, not entirely lies, but more embellishments of the truth that painted me as the bad guy for abandoning my family. There were also a few relevant facts that were left out of those conversations as well. After the truth began to come out, he warmed up to me more. It helped when I showed him my shop and my latest projects. Even though he was more into the classic Dodges, we both appreciated each other's vehicles. Hey, we are both car enthusiasts. At least he wasn't one of those wimpy guys that drove an automatic. His Challenger had a manual transmission. About halfway through the week, a new wedding date was made. It was going to be at the same venue on the same weekend a year later. This time, I would be paying for it and walking her down the aisle. Also, Marie was drafted to help with the wedding. Yes, Jenny was going to be a bridesmaid as well. Carly and Bobby called everyone in the wedding party and gave them the updates. Well, everyone except Kayla and Clarence. Over the next several months, Carly and I worked hard on rebuilding our relationship. Bobby and I also got to know each other better. We went to several car shows, entering Marie's GTO, my '72 truck, Bobby's Challenger, and even had Jenny enter a 1974 Firebird that I got for her. Carly and Bobby came over and spent a couple of days with us a couple of times a month. Josh even showed up a few times. It was harder with him because he was always closer to his mother than me, but we rebuilt some of our relationship. I think he did it more for Carly than me, but I will take it. Besides, he always had a bit of news from home. Speaking of which, it was not going very well for Kayla and Clarence. Clarence had moved out and filed for divorce. The good news for Kayla was that Clarence filed under irreconcilable differences instead of adultery. That meant that the harsh penalties of the prenup wouldn't be enforced. He filed that way to get it over with faster and without a fight. The good news for Clarence was that he had a prenup. The prenup specified that all the assets he had before getting married were off the table. Kayla would get half of the assets built during the wedding, but there wasn't much of that once the assets from before the marriage were factored out. She would basically just get to keep the house and get about $50,000. As far as the house went, Clarence did try to get a piece of it, but he didn't have any proof that he had a claim. Sure, it was his money that was used to buy my share out after my divorce, but there was no real proof of that. Apparently, he took out a business loan for his company to come up with the money, but never documented what exactly he used the money for. Also, they never added his name to the title of the house. Since it was Kayla's house before they got married, she refused to even discuss it. Clarence ended up paying off the loan with nothing to show for it. By the time he realized that he wouldn't be getting his money from the house back, it was too late to refile under adultery. Word about Kayla's affair spread, and her standing in the community suffered a big hit. Her friends began avoiding her, and the invitations to parties, charity events, and other events dried up. Even worse for her, since she didn't work and relied on Clarence's money, her financial situation suffered enormously. Clarence learned an expensive lesson. He was out a couple $100,000 from buying out my half of the house. He was out another $28,000 for the wedding that fell apart. He also had to pay Kayla $50,000 in the divorce. Then, there was the humiliation. Kayla was angry that her affairs were publicly revealed, and that Clarence was divorcing her the way he did. She began telling her remaining friends that she cheated on him because he was boring and didn't even know how to have fun. She also told all her girlfriends that he refused to do nice things for her, even though he demanded she do everything for him. That kind of gossip spreads like wildfire. It didn't take long before every woman that he tried to pick up in a bar would simply laugh at him. He became something of a recluse, only going to work and straight home. His social life evaporated. "Ready, Daddy?" My oldest daughter asked. "No father is ever really ready to let go of their daughters, but I am honored to do this for you," I replied. The doors opened, the music began and filled the church. I stepped beginning with my left foot and proudly began walking my daughter down the aisle. I did a quick glance and my smile got bigger. My ex-wife was sitting in the fourth row. My wife Marie was at her place of honor in the first row. I would be joining her after I took care of my last important honor for my daughter. Who gives this woman to be wed? As her father, I give her to be wed. I spoke loudly. "Love you, Munchkin," I whispered to her as I gave her a hug before handing her off to Bobby. Yes, I neglected to mention my wife. No, it was not all my idea. Carly asked me to do it that way. I then turned, walked over, and sat next to my wife. To have and to hold. In sickness and in health. Through good times and bad. Forsaking all others. Carly practically screamed the last part out. Then, with a brilliant smile, she finished her vows. It was a beautiful ceremony. Cheers went up as they hugged at the end. I looked down from the head table. Marie was right beside me. I saw Kayla sitting at a table off to the side. She didn't really look happy. Every time she looked up and saw Marie sitting in her spot, she scowled. I did notice that she was taking advantage of the open bar. Clarence had not been invited. I really don't know if he would have come even if he had been. My last great accomplishment for my daughter was complete. I had walked her down the aisle, given her a way to be married, gave a beautiful toast to the newly married couple, danced with my daughter to the father-daughter-daughter dance, then danced with my wife while my daughter and her husband and his parents danced to the second song. My obligations were complete. I was sitting at the table beside my wife. My younger daughter was out dancing with one of the group of boys that were vying for her attention. "Pardon me, Marie, is it? May I borrow your husband for this dance?" I heard a familiar voice behind me request from my wife. Marie and I turned around to face my ex-wife. Marie eyed her for a moment before responding. "Just make sure you return him to where you found him." She looked at me. "I trust you. It's her I don't trust to not try anything foolish." I led Kayla out onto the floor. They started up a slow song. It wouldn't have surprised me if she had requested it just for this purpose. I was careful to keep a bit of distance and not pull her in tight. We danced for a bit before she started talking. "You were supposed to give me that one special night. We should have moved past that and gone on like normal. This was supposed to be the two of us together today. And you were not supposed to have gone out that night. You should have known me better than to think that I would have been okay with you being with someone else, no matter how many times you did it. I didn't do anything wrong. I told you about it before I did it. I didn't sneak around behind your back. Whether you told me or not is not relevant. The fact that you were with someone else is wrong. Besides, I never gave you permission. I told you not to do it, but you did it anyway. I never wanted this. I just wanted that one night. Then we could have been together forever. You know that you are the only person I have ever loved. There was never even the slightest amount of love for him. Then why did you marry him?" Because you divorced me. Sure, I didn't love him, but I liked him okay. After you left, I didn't want to be alone. I thought that I might grow to love him, but I could never get over you. I did all that stuff to you because I was upset that you left me. I still loved you, sick, but you wouldn't even talk to me. After that night, I realized that you were everything I would ever need, and I would never go out with another person again. I couldn't help laughing. Not just no, but absolutely no. First off, even if I wasn't married now, what you did in poisoning my kids against me killed any possibility of us ever getting back together. Now, I am married again to a wonderful woman, and I have another daughter that I love as well. The best I can offer is respect when we are at the same place and at any events with our children and grandchildren. Thankfully, the song ended shortly thereafter. I didn't talk to her again that night. She couldn't afford the mortgage payments on the house, so she ended up selling it and moving into a small apartment. She got enough money out of the house to be able to live on if she was careful. She did go out with her friends occasionally, but as far as I know, she never had another relationship. Clarence ended up living alone as well. Carly and Bobby had a long, loving marriage. They had 3 kids, 2 boys and 1 girl. Josh eventually got married to a kind girl as well. They had 2 daughters. As far as I know, neither one cheated on the other. There are those who believe that I should have sought revenge on Kayla and Clarence. The reality is that there was really nothing I could do to hurt them without either going to jail or having it backfire on me. I decided to just move forward and live my life as best as I could. There is a saying, the best revenge is a life well lived. I did that and let karma handle the rest. Karma is a troublemaker, and her undercover name is Retribution. Clarence and Kayla were not ruined, but they did not escape without consequences. No, I didn't have anything to do with it, but I still feel good about myself. I have my wife, my daughter, and my 2 other children back in my life. I am surrounded by people who care about me. I have a good life. Ready, Daddy? My daughter asked. No father is ever really ready to let go of their daughters, but I am honored to do this for you, I replied. The doors opened, the music began and filled the church. I stepped beginning with my left foot and proudly began walking my daughter down the aisle. My wife was at her place of honor in the first row, smiling widely. I would be joining her after I took care of my last important honor for my daughter. Don't worry, Daddy. I'm going through with this today. I talked to Carly, and I'm doing it right the first time. Jenny assured me.